Thinkingness is arising out of some base aspect of the mind. There is like a compulsion to think. There's like an energy of thinkingness, a desire to think. And as one begins to get that thinkingness is arising of its own, one begins to discern that consciousness, thinkingness, and the whole field is not your personal self. So spiritual evolution really begins to take off when you stop identifying with the physicality of the body. You realize I'm not a physical body. You realize that you are not the animal instincts of the ego. You begin to see that mind is happening of its own. If you were your mind, you could tell it to stop. People say, my thoughts are driving me crazy. And I'd say, well, why don't you stop them then? They say, well, I can't. I said, yes, it's because you're not your mind. You're not your physical body, and you're not your mind. If you were your mind, you could say, stop, and it would stop thinking. No. You can say, mind, stop, and it completely ignores you. So the mind must not be who you are. If it was who you are, it would instantly obey you. No, it's got a life of its own. Wow. So there's something that's really sort of foreign and not yourself that's running, that you're paying attention to. All this thinkingness then is happening of its own. So we then begin to really move ahead in consciousness, and people at that point very often get interested in meditation. And the only purpose of meditation then is to sit quietly and watch how the mind is working. And as you do, you see these thoughts and these feelings arise. And if you stop resisting them and just begin to surrender them, then you get to the realization that these thoughts are arising from an energy field which is devoted to the creation of thinking, of thoughts. And then you begin to realize that you're hooked on them. It's really an addiction. There's really an addiction to this entertainment going on. So we bemoan the mind. We say, oh, I suffer. Oh, I wish I could forget this and forget that. That's not the truth. Because if you really wanted to, you would stop. No. The thing that gives the ego its seeming hold over us is that the ego, which does not survive on love, it survives on not love. What it survives on is the juice that it gets out of its positionalities. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. You can't give up love and hate and fear and jealousy and all those things just because you decide to. You have to dismantle it. So non-duality means you start taking the mind apart to see what makes it work. Once you understand what makes it work, where its juice is coming from, then you have a chance. So non-duality means we begin to look at thought and we see that what propagates the endless succession of thoughts is the payoff that we get from them. You say, well, I don't get any payoff out of guilt and suffering. Oh, yes, you do. What is the payoff you get out of guilt and suffering? It's guilt and suffering. It's its own payoff. You get to feel awful. You get to feel, oh, woe is me. First of all, you get the satisfaction of egocentricity. You get to examine the wonderful, wonderful entity called I with a small I, and its dramatic vicissitudes. The great drama of one's life plays across one's head, and one is entranced with it. What's going on is that the thoughts, the ego, creates these thoughts and feelings, and the reason they propagate is for the juice we get out of them. So you don't have to give up thinking or thoughts. The ego, all you have to give up is the juice. The juice of punishing yourself, the juice of feeling right. Think about the juice of feeling righteous. I mean, look at victimhood. The biggest business in today's world is victimhood. It's victimhood that dominates the airwaves, dominates the courts, dominates politics. Victimhood is what it's all about, and the enormous competition to be the bigger, better victim of the moment.